Hi, my name is Manu, and today I wanted to review my article on sexuality and spirituality. I plan to do this every week, and my plan is basically to read the whole article first, and then I'm going to give you some added context. I also might stop here and there just to explain some of the word choicing. Um, and Let's get into it. So, Sexuality and Spirituality by Manu Rayon. The amount of bullshit around sexuality and spirituality is huge. And bullshit in the sense of, it's not so much about right and wrong as it is about misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation, in my view, about the role of sexuality, especially even from a psychological perspective, which basically views us as monkeys wanting to procreate. But while there is that part of us, I mean, ultimately we're spiritual beings from a spiritual perspective, and so I think bullshit pretty much encompasses that. Um, Within the Buddhist community, there's been a number of teachers that have all gone down because they did everything from making inappropriate sexual advances on students to flat out rape. I've seen everything firsthand, from very senior Buddhist monks watching porn on their phones, game monks messaging me hoping to get lucky, to a number of other disturbing things. It seems like most Westerners are almost clueless on this topic as a whole and very often get manipulated by it. Yeah, you should really almost always, I think people assume a lot, especially if you're a spiritual teacher, assume you're already pure, especially in the sexual domain. And I think that's usually more often false than true. And it also doesn't mean they can't be a good spiritual teacher because a lot of the times people who are great spiritual teachers are people who have struggled with, addiction and everything else and had very hard paths, a lot of times harder than the average person. And that's why they become spiritual teachers. And yeah. With that said, my intention here isn't to make a traditional Buddhist point of view that all sex outside of marriage is bad, or that if everyone just repressed all their sexual desires, the world would be a better place. The desire for sex is probably one of the strongest drives within a human being, and I don't think this question has a simple answer. There have been many times I've talked to people about my own struggle with lust, just to have them come back to me and tell me to try tantric sex, which usually means slow sex with some eye gazing and some mindfulness mixed in, which has no relationship to any legit spiritual teaching I've ever seen. To me, this always seemed like telling an alcoholic to just be more aware of the beer when he drinks it. The thing about this too, the tantric thing is, I put this kind of in the beginning because it's honestly like the thing, especially from other spiritual seekers, is probably the first thing they tell me whenever I talk about this stuff. So that's why it's there. Almost every great saint I can think of, with the exception of just a handful of people, were celibate. That handful of people I know of either had either a spiritual lineage in the Kashmir Shaivite tradition or Tibetan Buddhism. The one other exception to this was someone who was already married prior to following the spiritual path. But after reaching higher states of consciousness, they usually claim to have stopped all sexual activities. I believe there is a legit way in which sex can help in reaching higher states of consciousness. I just think it comes after you've already mastered celibacy, and it comes with a lot of risks. Now that I've said that spirituality and sexuality, what spirituality and sexuality aren't, I'm going to try to give my own take on what it is. The first distinction that has to be made is sexuality is in its purest form. Oh, messed that one up. Let me start that one again. The first distinction that has to be made is sexuality in its purest form transcends the physical. The promise of spiritual work is that we don't need anything outside of ourselves. The more that our happiness is dependent on things outside of ourselves, the greater amount of suffering because outside circumstances are always changing. This is probably like the key point. I mean, with all spiritual stuff should be put in the context of becoming freer and freer from external circumstances and being able to really channel into something higher that comes from within. And a lot of the philosophies, when I hear people talk, they don't really talk within this sort of frame. It's still always about just dealing with lust per se, but it's always, you know, always in the context of sort of like the psychological framework where it's like, oh, well, we are monkeys and we have sexual desire, therefore it's almost like hopeless. But if you believe in enlightenment and believe in what the spiritual sages basically tell us, it's that there can all those impulses that go external and give us some sort of experience. Those are all within us, and then we can basically directly channel those if we reach high enough states of consciousness. Okay, so with that said, um, therefore, everything which is sexual and leads you outside of yourself should be categorized as lust. With that said, hypothetically, if lust is overcome, you can have sex. It just also happens that once lust is overcome and the higher energies are experienced, I think much of its appeal is lost. One of my biggest disappointments with Buddhism and almost all spiritual teachings as a whole is that no one seems to really be able to address this topic in a way that ever seemed to really work for me. In Buddhism, if you're struggling with lust, you're often told to meditate on the different parts of the body, like skin, hair, bile, urine, etc. Then you contemplate how there is nothing intrinsically attractive in them and try to develop disgust in order to balance out the cravings. Well, apparently this has worked for some, even though I haven't talked to one person that said it's worked for them. And in spite of my best efforts, I found that no matter how much disgust I developed for the body, it seemed to just get fetishized in some way. Also, I think this doesn't work because it tends to further polarize the issue, which leads to generating more shame and guilt. The polarization thing is like, especially recently for me, I realized is really key. Um, it's the more that it's kind of a good, bad, right, wrong thing, it definitely leads to more shame, more guilt, and you got to kind of find this middle path where you just kind of accept yourself the way it is and surrender to that. And so, there's one other thing about this. There are, I think I have talked when I was thinking actually about this now. There are a couple, um, not a couple. There was really one monk that swears by this technique that I did meet, but like with most of them, I kind of only was thinking about people that I kind of knew personally on a deep level. You do get plenty of people on the internet or other monks that I've met casually that have, said that this worked. So, it is what it is. Some of the best advice I got was from a Sri Lankan monk here in Los Angeles who I had confessed to having issues with women, porn, and lust in general. He told me what he told me was to not feel guilty, to let go of the shame, and that it was okay. Just keep working at it little by little. Ever since then, that was more or less my approach. The number one thing that has always bothered me about, actually, I'll just add to that monk, that was Bhante Malvapiananda in the Sri Lankan temple. So, yeah, that was quite insightful. The number one thing that has always bothered me about spirituality and sexuality is that people are so dishonest about it, not just to others, but to themselves. I think most people can admit to themselves that ideally they would like to overcome lust while it still has a strong grip over them because the guilt and shame that would result is crushing. And also, too, I guess it's like it's not even when their world, like even the definition that I gave of what lust is probably not even a reality. But one thing you learn from doing meditation for a while is that like when you start feeling lustful, it's suffering. You are suffering there because you want something you don't have in this moment, and it creates a certain level of anxiety. And where was it? On a personal level, I've been trying to work hard on freeing myself from porn and sexual imagery on social media. As a guy who has struggled with lust, it's been an uphill battle, and no one I've had to learn. And okay, I'm gonna start on that one. As a guy who has struggled with lust, it's been an uphill battle, and one that I've had to learn won't be won without failing and trying again repeatedly. When it comes to dating, I think I would be better off finding a partner who shared my passion for spirituality. But so far I haven't found that person. In general, I've found that since I'm dealing with a real person when dating, it's a lot healthier than dealing with just images on a computer. But of course, it comes with the risk of hurt feelings and the complexities of relationships. I've talked to a number of guys who see porn as a way to manage their own lust, but if the goal is to be able to see divinity within ourselves and others, I think this is feeding the problem rather than managing it. And even though I do know people that have looked at, say, attractive images of women and start trying to see it as more divine, and um, some people say that that's helped them to overcome the polarities, and I could see that working. Um, I know that since I've dated a fair amount, I'm fairly confident in my ability to be honest and open and have good relationships. But I definitely think that I don't even know if I could recommend it to most people. Kind of what I'm saying here. This is kind of just more my own approach. Um, if you're stuck between, or if you think you'll end up getting attached and there's going to be a lot of drama and things are going to go really horribly with any sort of relationship, then I mean, I guess really do meeting those needs another way, whether it's through porn or something else. If you can't control it, uh, makes sense. Um, the only thing is, like, with anything you can get stuck. So it's like, okay, well, is there a progression here? Because if it's the same thing day in and day out for years, then, it's not really working, is it? Um, there has to be some way in which you are still have your ideal in mind and are striving towards it. Um, if there is anything I would like people to take away from this article, it's two things. One, know that if you are struggling with lust, it doesn't make you higher or lower than anyone else. Myself and so many others that have been on the spiritual path for long periods of time still struggle with it. Everyone is different and tends to have one, maybe sometimes two major spiritual issues that they will um, that issues that will be what they struggle with for the bulk of their spiritual path. Anger, greed, and delusion being other examples. Second, don't let the pressure of your spiritual ideals crush you or make you think that something is wrong. Anytime we set a goal for ourselves, take losing weight for example, we will start to feel the pressure to eat a certain way or exercise. This pressure may be uncomfortable, but it's part of growing. It's part of the process. Too often, people are under the impression that if you are trying to attain some type of goal but aren't feeling great doing it, something is wrong. But it's not true. Keep your spiritual ideals sharp in your mind and learn to be kind to yourself like a baby puppy that needs training. In conclusion, every week I will be putting out a new article, and then a couple of days later I'll release a video talking about the topic, which is this video. I'm looking forward to the feedback, and I wish you all the best. May you all be happy, peaceful, and liberated. So that's the article. You can go to humblestature.com. That's where I posted it. And let me see. I feel like I kind of said what I need to say as we were going through the article. Um, I guess just to summarize, this is obviously one part. I feel like in the West, especially, we're so preoccupied with sexuality. That's one thing about traveling to Asia and all over the world is, like even in our humor, our TV, everything is actually very sexualized advertising. It's so prominent in our minds, and I feel like this is almost like the one of the primary issues Westerners have to struggle with spiritually because it's just been so fed by our environment, and that's why I basically made it the first article. Um, but moving forward, the next one I plan to write is going to be more about the warrior dichotomy. Since I did a lot of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and I'm now getting back into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and martial arts, I figure it's kind of a fitting topic. And, I'm also going to have we're going to be doing group sits both in Baldwin Park and another place in North Hollywood, even though the North Hollywood is more secret. So I'm only inviting a couple people that I know to be able to attend that. And so um, yeah, that's kind of the plan. And what else about this topic? Is there anything else before I conclude? Um, no, I think that just about covers it. So thank you everyone who's watching, and you know, please leave a comment. And I also have a YouTube, so please subscribe there. And may you all be happy, peaceful, liberated. Thank you.